A very warm good morning to all of you. Dear students, once again, I would like to welcome all of you to a new session of the Civics class. Today, we are continuing with the same chapter from Civics, chapter number 3, Prime Minister and Council of Ministers, part 3. Do you remember what we were discussing in the last class? In the last class, we were discussing about the different kinds of ministers. We have seen three different kinds of ministers. First one, cabinet ministers. Second one, ministers of state. And third one, deputy ministers. Today, we are going to continue with the same topic, that is related to the Council of Ministers. Then we will be discussing some important points related to the cabinet ministers or the cabinet and the formation of the cabinet. Then finally we will discuss about the appointment of the ministers as well as the cabinet. So these are the points which we are going to discuss. Some important points related to the Council of Ministers, then some factors related to the cabinet and their appointment. So without wasting time, let's begin. Council of Ministers comprise Prime Minister and number of other ministers. So when we hear the title, what is meant by Council of Ministers, or who are the members of the Council of Ministers? First of all, Prime Minister, he is the head of the ministry, and second one, number of other ministers. We have already seen three different criteria or the three different kinds of ministers. The Constitution specified the number of members. Actually, in the beginning, or when our Constitution framed, there were no limitations, there were no guidelines related to the number of ministers. But in 91st Amendment Act 2003, the number of the members in the state as well as the central government has got specified, or there were some limitations. Simply the government cannot increase the number of ministers in any of the criteria, other in the cabinet ministers or the ministers of the state or subordinate ministers. In any of the criteria of ministers, the government simply cannot increase the number. And there were certain guidelines related to the number of ministers in the center as well as the states. Let's see what is that. The size of the Council of Ministers at the center and in the states to 15% of the strength of Lok Sabha and state legislatures. Which means, suppose in the state legislature there are 100 members. I'm just taking a number. It doesn't mean that in a state legislature there is only 100 members. But for example, for understanding, I'm saying maximum number of members in a legislature where there is 100 members will be 15. That's what is meant by 15% of the total strength in Lok Sabha as well as legislature. That is the maximum number of Council of Ministers which can be appointed by the particular government, either in center or in the state. In the case of smaller states, the maximum number of ministers allowed is 12. All the states are not having the same size according to the geographical area as well as the population. The size of the states are different. So comparatively, small states are permitted with 12 ministers. And there is a reason behind it. The government has taken such a decision in order to check defections from one party to another. Because suppose one party has got two ministries, and the other smaller parties, what they will demand, they will say that they also want to become, or there must be a minister from their party. So such kinds of allegations will be there, such kinds of problems will be there. In order to avoid such kinds of problem, the government has made such a restriction in increasing the number of ministers in government, either in state or in the center. Second one, to curb the government expenditure. So if there is 30 ministers, the government has to spend a huge amount for their protection, to maintain the protocol and so on. So to stop the unnecessary expenditure of the government, the central government, as per the instruction, has limited the number of ministers in state as well as the central ministry. Now we are going to discuss some factors related to the cabinet. First of all, we are going to see about the formation of the cabinet. The cabinet is composed of a small but important body of senior leaders of the party. The cabinet doesn't mean that all the members of the parliament or all the members of Lok Sabha, they are the members of cabinet. No, of course it is not. Cabinet means it's a small group but important body of senior leaders of the party. We have already seen about the cabinet ministers. What are the specialities of? They are experienced leaders of the party, and it included in the council of ministers. Okay, so cabinet is also including the council of ministers. Two different criteria of ministers we have already seen. The ministers of the state as well as the deputy ministers. So there will be some chosen people from them, and they are also members of the cabinet. They hold important portfolios. So cabinet ministers are having important departments like defense, railway, finance, and so on. We have already seen it. Decide major policies of the government. The decisions of the government will be ultimately coming from the cabinet, or the cabinet is making the different policies and programs of the government. So decide major policies of the government. They will be trusted men of the prime minister. If a person wants to become a cabinet minister, that person must be the trusted man of prime minister, or in other words, the prime minister must have a trust on that person. Then and there only that person can become a cabinet minister. Form the nucleus of the administration. They are the central part or the pivot of the administration. Entire activities are really coming from this cabinet. So they form the nucleus of the administration. They are the center. They are the main core of the administration. The cabinet is the pivot of administration. I have already told you about it. Okay, so it becomes the center. All other activities are coming from there, and all the programs and the policies of the government will be decided and implemented by the cabinet. The cabinet takes important decisions related to the different factors and different matters of the country will be taken by the cabinet. So ultimate decision of the government will be from the cabinet. Decisions are communicated to the other ministers. So once if the cabinet is taken a decision, they will be expressing or communicating these informations with the other ministers. Sometimes there will be other ministers who are the subordinates or who are there to help the particular cabinet ministers, and all these informations will be communicated to the other ministers. They have to follow these decisions even though they are not interested, even though they were not happy with, they have to follow it. That is the rule. Now we are going to see about the appointment of the cabinet. How the cabinet is being appointed. The prime minister is the person behind the cabinet. So the prime minister will be appointing. It doesn't mean that officially he is appointing, but he is taking decision. His senior and trustworthy colleagues will become the cabinet members. So prime minister will be suggesting the name of those trustworthy colleagues to the president, and the president will be appointing the cabinet ministers. The prime minister choosing his senior and trustworthy colleagues and advise the president to appoint. The president then appoints them as ministers. So prime minister alone cannot appoint a person as a cabinet minister. But what is needed? The prime minister will choose his senior and trustworthy colleagues, most trusty men of the group, and advise the president to appoint those people as the cabinet ministers, and the president then appoints them as ministers. As per the advice of the prime minister, the president can appoint a cabinet minister. So president himself cannot simply appoint a person as a cabinet minister. He has to get proper advice from the prime minister, and then and there only the president can appoint a person as the cabinet minister. We have already seen it. The responsibility of the prime minister is to advise the president in all the different matters. We have already seen it. President is being supported and helped by the Prime Minister and the other ministers. So dear students, these are the different important factors related to the cabinet, their formation and the appointment of the cabinet. So here we are winding up, and we will meet again in the next class with a new topic. Till then, I would like to sign off. Thank you.